Hello, BookTube. Welcome back to the History Shelf. I am your host, as ever. My name is Peg. How are you? Today we have an overdue and an upbeat book haul today. Upbeat because last week has been kind of rough. I've had a very sick elderly dog, my dog Gidget. But we got some good news yesterday. And we hope that is under control with some medication and she's resting right now. But I have just been elsewhere last week, just worried about her. But, fingers crossed, prayers, knock on wood, she will get better and gain some weight. But anyway, don't want to go into that too much, but, um, you know, I just felt relieved and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do a book haul that has been waiting for you guys for a long time because I had a huge Hamilton book haul as of months ago, well, a couple months ago, but then we were in a mad rush to try to see if we could move out of here before the snow flies here in Colorado, but that's not going to happen. We're going to be in the townhome probably through winter, and this thing settled down with the pets and everything else, then we can look at maybe buying a new construction and then having a place to move into. What a concept, huh? Rather than just selling this place, which I could have done easily, and then being homeless. But I decided I didn't want to be homeless this winter. We've got a book haul, a massive Hamilton book haul, as you could tell from the thumbnail. I pulled the box out and I said, I was waiting to do this book haul in the new home, wherever that was going to be. But in the meantime, I've also been given the green light. If I want to buy a few more books, I can. So I already have a second Hamilton Hamilton book haul. Not as big as this one, but that box arrived just the other day. And we have a little mini dolly down in the foyer that is filled with packages, mostly from publishers. But I did get my second Hamilton book haul, or my Hamilton book order that I placed about a week ago. I'm surprised I got it so quickly, but I'm behind. And so as you can tell from the thumbnail, I have a very big box. So I put a few here on the desk, but once I'm through these, I have to lean down to go get the rest of the books. So you're going to kind of see me dipping and weaving. But anyway, I wanted to make a video because I was in a good mood and just kind of feeding off the good energy of Gidget. And you know how it is when you have an animal that you love dearly and they're not doing well. It can be very scary and it's very worrisome, and we've all been through it. But anyway, today's a good day and I wanted to make a video. Okay, so let's start with this one. I decided to pick this up. I haven't read this, and there's a lot of Winston Churchill books out there, right? But I haven't read this work by him. He wrote this. This is his own work. And this is, get this up here so I can get, this is The River War, an account of the reconquest of the Sudan. And it's a Skyhorse Publications version, just a little paperback. And if you guys are interested, I will, of course, I'll leave the link below to Hamilton book. And if any of these books interest you, just kind of, maybe pause the video. There's too many books for me to list in the comments or in the description box. But if you just pause the video, go to the website, type in the book name, they'll have it there. I can give you prices. I like giving you guys prices because, it's helpful for you to know. And if there's any left, you can pick it up. But the River War here, I picked this up for a song. This was $2.95. This is the young Winston Churchill's first major historical work. His stirring and authoritative account of the Anglo-Egyptian reconquest of Sudan. First published in 1899 and revised for the 1902 edition by its author, Winston Churchill, this history of the River War in Sudan vividly chronicles the military campaign that altered the destinies of England, Egypt, and the Arabian peoples in Northeast Africa. More by accident than design, in Churchill's view, England was drawn into the affairs of Egypt in the 1880s, for at the same historical moment that the English under Lord Cromer were granted virtually sovereign power to establish a sound government in Egypt and to stimulate its national economy, the Mahdi rebelled in the Egyptian suzerainty of Sudan. Violence and bloodshed ensued, and the English soon found themselves embroiled alongside their Egyptian ally in a bitter conflict with the fiercely nationalistic Mahdi. A conflict that culminated in the massacre of General Charles Gordon at Khartoum and the emergence of the fanatical regime known as the Dervish Empire. In this illuminating volume, Churchill not only dramatically relates the catastrophic events in Sudan's 1880s, but also places them in the context of Sudanese history. And we know that he is a fantastic writer. So I was pleased to get this for just $2.95. So that's the first book that I picked up that I've been waiting forever to show you guys. Ooh. Okay, now we're going to be all over the place. History-wise and time-wise. I think this is probably the first biography that I actually own on this gentleman. I've always been slightly intrigued on the periphery. He seemed to start off well, but boy, was he shady as you know what. This is Amiable Scoundrel, Simon Cameron, Lincoln's Scandalous Secretary of War by Paul Cahan. As we know, Simon Cameron was kind of just, he resigned in ignominy during Lincoln's first term and was replaced by Edwin Stanton. But yeah, he was corrupt. So Simon Cameron, I don't have a biography on Simon Cameron. I've got him on all the other Chase, Stanton. I don't think I have Gideon. I might have a Gideon Wells. Who's the other guy? I can't remember. But anyway, Simon Cameron. So I'll just read you a quick. Oh, and this one, if you're interested in getting this one, and it's a brand new hardcover. These are all brand new books. These are not used books. These are bargain books from Hamilton. They might have a remainder mark. This one doesn't even have a remainder mark. It's just beautiful. Brand new hardcover. This one was $6.95. Okay, so it says here, from abject poverty to undisputed political boss of Pennsylvania, Lincoln's Secretary of War, Senator, Chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and a founder of the Republican Party, Simon Cameron was one of the 19th century's most prominent political figures. In his wake, however, he left a series of questionable political and business dealings, and at the age of 80, even a sex scandal. I did not know about that. You sleazy little devil, you. Far more than a biography of Cameron, Amiable Scoundrel is also a portrait of an era that allowed, indeed encouraged, a man such as Cameron to seize political control. The political changes of the early 19th century enabled him not only to improve his status, but also to exert real political authority. The changes caused by the Civil War, in turn, allowed Cameron to consolidate his political authority into a successful, well-oiled political machine. A key figure in designing and implementing the Union's military strategy during the Civil War's crucial first year, Cameron played an essential role in pushing Abraham Lincoln to permit the enlistment of African Americans into the U.S. Army, a stance that eventually led to his forced resignation. Yet his legacy has languished, nearly forgotten, save for the fact that his name has become shorthand for corruption, even though no evidence has ever been presented to prove that Cameron was corrupt. Well, I don't know about that. Okay, well, we'll have to see about that. Okay, so it's an illuminating portrait of his times and the man. So Amiable Scoundrel, we'll see. It sounds like this is put out by Potomac Books. Looks like Paul Cahan is kind of championing Simon Cameron here. All right, it's a little Civil War history for you. We're going to jump over to a country that's been in the news, obviously, of late. And I've always been intrigued by reading about this country's history. And in fact, I have another book down here of a different sort about this country. But this one is about a certain family dynasty, if you will. This is A Kingdom of Their Own, The Family Karzai and the Afghan Disaster by Joshua Partlow. So it's put out by Knopf. This was a fairly recent book. Yeah, it just came out 2016. But it says here, I've always been intrigued by Afghanistan and its history. If you watch my videos on any type of regular basis, I think in one of my other like book hauls, I had bought this huge book on Afghanistan. The Wars of Afghanistan is what I bought, and that's just one of the many books that I own on Afghanistan. It says here, the key to understanding the calamitous Afghan war is the complex, ultimately failed relationship between the powerful, duplicitous Karzai family and the United States, brilliantly portrayed here by the former Kabul bureau chief for the Washington Post. The United States went to Afghanistan on a simple mission: avenge the September 11th attacks and drive the Taliban from power. This took less than 2 months. Over the course of the next decade, the ensuing fight for power and money, supplied to one of the poorest nations on earth in ever greater amounts, left the region even more dangerous than before the first troops arrived. And actually, that was reported in a book I read recently and reviewed, the Afghanistan Papers by Craig Whitlock in the Washington Post. So I think a lot of this, there's going to be a lot of crossover, I think, when it comes to that. Just about how the money poured into this nation, and it was just all about the United States showing how much money they could dump in. They didn't care about following up to see where the money was going, how it was being used, and it was just money was pouring in for things that were just nonsensical, that wouldn't work in a country like Afghanistan. So, yeah, I'll be intrigued to see how Joshua Partlow characterizes this. At the center of this story is the Karzai family. President Hamid Karzai and his brothers began the war as symbols of a new Afghanistan, moderate, educated, fluent in the cultures of East and West, and the antithesis of the brutish and backward Taliban regime. The siblings, from a prominent political family close to Afghanistan's former king, had been thrust into exile by the Soviet war. While Hamid Karzai lived in Pakistan and worked with the resistance, others moved to the U.S., finding work as waiters and managers before opening their own restaurants. After September 11th, the brothers returned home to help rebuild Afghanistan and reshape their homeland with ambitious plans. Today, with the country in shambles, they are in open conflict with one another and their Western allies. Joshua Partlow's clear-eyed analysis reveals the mistakes, squandered hopes, and wasted chances behind the scenes of a would-be political dynasty. Nothing illustrates the arc of the war and America's relationship with Afghanistan, from optimism to despair, friendship to enmity, as neatly as the story of the Karzai family itself, told here in its entirety for the first time. So I was very intrigued when I saw this listed on Hamilton and Hamilton Books, and I definitely wanted to pick this up. If you're interested, this book, I've got a whole list here because there's a lot of books that I bought. $5.95 in a nice deckle-edged version. Get one little remainder dot there, but other than that, we've got these photos in here throughout, so add that to my Afghanistan collection. And another writer I have followed over the years, and I desperately wanted this book, and I've been waiting for it to be at a price that I was willing to pay for, and I think this is the lowest I can find it right now. Well, this is Amity Shlaes, who wrote the epic biography on Calvin Coolidge. This is her new book on Great Society. Great Society, A New History by Amity Shlaes. This is put out by Harper. So I got this for $7.95 on Hamilton. Yeah, I'll just give you a quick synopsis of this. It says here, in Great Society, A New History, Amity Shlaes offers a powerful companion to her legendary history of the 1930s, The Forgotten Man. Shlaes shows there was scant difference between two presidents we consider opposites, Johnson and Nixon. Just as technocratic military planning by the best and the brightest made failure in Vietnam inevitable, so planning by a team of the domestic best and brightest guaranteed fiasco at home. Now forgotten figures such as the visionary Union leader Walter Reuther, the agonized Federal Reserve Chairman Arthur Burns, and the pugnacious business executive Lemuel Boulware set the nation's course. Great Society captures a dramatic contest with lessons both dark and bright for our own time. I read the description of this at the very bottom. You know what? It might have been more provocative if I read a little bit from the top. It says here, today a battle rages in our country. Many Americans are attracted to socialism and economic redistribution. Opponents of those ideas argue for purer capitalism. All envision a better society, even a great society. Okay. In the 1960s, Americans also dreamed of a great society. Then, too, we debated socialism and capitalism, public sector reform versus private sector advancement. The only question was, how do we get to great? Time and again, whether under John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, or Richard Nixon, the country chose the public sector. Yet the targets of our idealism proved elusive. Johnson did not manage to cure poverty as he had promised. What's more, Johnson's and Nixon's programs shackled millions of families in permanent government dependence. Ironically, the costs of entitlement commitments made a half-century ago preclude the very reforms that Americans will need in coming decades. So, sounds like some really good heady thinking here, or heady writing and research. So you're probably asking yourself, why is Peggy suddenly changed into different clothing, and why is her hair standing on end? Well, that's because we had a massive technical failure yesterday. I had filmed almost a 1-hour book haul, which I should know better. From now on, I'm going to break these up into 2 pieces, 2 parts. But anyway, the footage you saw was what was salvageable from a corrupt file that Martine was able to... Even then, I think the dubbing might be a little bit off. She had to try to sync the audio. The whole thing was just corrupted. And so I think I got through 4 books, and I've got 12 more to go. I got to reshoot this. Thanks for staying with me, guys. So the last book that we looked at in this Hamilton book haul was The Great Society, A New History by Anomaly. Okay, and just know that, I had really great comments on all these books yesterday, and I almost wanted to cry when I realized the whole file was just gone, or was corrupted. So, welcome back to the second half of this. Okay, so we did Anomaly, and now we're going to go back to the Civil War, and I'm going to talk about a biographer whom I recently reviewed for publication. He has an upcoming biography on another member of Lincoln's cabinet, Abraham Lincoln's cabinet. And he has previously written on Seward, William Seward, and on this fella. And I already had a biography on Edwin Stanton by William Marvel, but I really liked this author's style when he did a biography coming out on Salmon P. Chase, Lincoln's Secretary of the Treasury, which is coming out soon. But this is his book on Stanton. This is Stanton, Lincoln's War Secretary, by Walter Starr. It was like $6.95, brand new book. So I thought I'd check it out. I don't think I really need to read a description. Again, with Lincoln's, it kind of goes with the book I showed earlier in this other part of the video that worked. The Amiable Scoundrel, that was, Edwin Stanton replaced Simon Cameron. So this is good old Walter Starr's biography on Stanton. Keep an eye out for his new one on Salmon P. Chase. I really enjoyed it, and wrote a review for another publication. But that's coming out this month, I believe. So so far he's done Seward, Stanton, and now Chase. I'd be curious to see if he's going to do like a Gideon Wells or was it Edward Bates? They're probably not big enough names to warrant a full biography, but you never know. But Walter Starr, a great writer, great biographer, great historian. I'm really hoping this video does not crap out again. I don't know why it just died on me. Okay, so this book I think was the one I paid the most for. It was $9.95, but University Press book from Johns Hopkins University Press. It just sounded like something that was right up my alley. As I hit myself in the head. This is The Eve of Spain, Myths of Origins in the History of Christian, Muslim, and Jewish Conflict by Patricia E. Grieve. So I will read a description of this. The Eve of Spain demonstrates how the telling and retelling of one of Spain's founding myths played a central role in the formation of that country's national identity. King Rodrigo, the last Visigoth king of Spain, rapes or possibly seduces La Cava, the daughter of his friend and counselor, Count Julian. In revenge, the Count travels to North Africa and conspires with its Berber rulers to send an invading army into Spain. So begins the Muslim conquest and the end of Visigothic rule. A few years later, in northern Spain, Pelayo initiates a Christian resistance and starts a new line of kings to which the present-day Spanish monarchy traces its roots. Patricia E. Grieve follows the evolution of this story from the Middle Ages into the modern era, as shifts in religious tolerance and cultural acceptance influenced its retelling. She explains how increasing anti-Semitism came to be woven into the tale during the Christian conquest of the peninsula in the form of traitorous Jewish conspirators. In the 16th century, the tale was linked to the looming threat of the Ottoman Turks. The story continued to resonate through the Enlightenment and into modern historiography, revealing the complex interactions of racial and religious conflict and evolving ideas of women's sexuality. In following the story of La Cava, Rodrigo, and Pelayo, Grieve explains how foundational myths and popular legends articulate struggles for national identity. She explores how myths are developed around few historical facts, how they come to be written into history, and how they are exploited politically, as in the expulsion of the Jews from Spain in 1492, followed by that of the Moriscos in 1609. Finally, Grieve focuses on the misogynistic elements of the story and asks why the fall of Spain is figured as a cautionary tale about a woman's sexuality. So it's a nice mixture of like medieval history, kind of, limiting with the national identity of Spain, and then linking it in a feminist stance. So it should be pretty interesting. Something meaty to sink the teeth into, as it were. So, The Eve of Spain by Patricia E. Grieve, and again, that was like $9.95. Okay, so the next book I got, I bought this on the heels of a recent book, a new book that I read and reviewed for Book Browse Review, called The Gallery of Miracles and Madness by Charlie English. Basically, it's about Hitler's war on art and what he deemed degenerate art, non-Aryan art, art that he considered reflected the mental illness of the artists. And it was a fantastic book. If I remember to, I'll link to the to my review and Book Browse below in the description box. But loved the book, and it made me want to read more on the topic. And this is kind of tangentially related. It's more about looted art and efforts to recover it even into modern times. But this is Hitler's Last Hostages, Looted Art in the Soul of the Third Reich by Mary M. Lane. Put out by Public Affairs. Again, I think it was another $6.95 book or something like that. But let's see, I'll just give you a quick synopsis here. Nazism ascended by brute force and cultural tyranny. Weimar Germany was a society in turmoil, and Hitler's rise was achieved not only by harnessing the military, but also by restricting artistic expression. Hitler, an artist himself, promised the dejected citizens of post-war Germany a purified Reich, purged of, quote, degenerate, quote, unquote, influences. When Hitler came to power in 1933, he removed so-called degenerate art from German society and promoted artists whom he considered the embodiment of the Aryan ideal. Artists who had produced challenging and provocative work fled the country. Curators and art dealers overhauled their stock. Thousands of great artworks disappeared, and only a fraction of them were rediscovered after World War II. In 2012, the German government confiscated roughly 1,200 works by Henri Matisse, George Grosz, Claude Monet, and other masters from the apartment of Cornelius Gurlitt, the reclusive son of one of Hitler's primary art dealers. For 2 years, the government kept the discovery a secret. In Hitler's Last Hostages, Mary Lane reveals the fate of those works and tells the definitive story of art in the Third Reich, in Germany's ongoing struggle to right the wrongs of the past. And this was written before the Gallery of Miracles and Madness, but you can add that Charlie English's book um, to this definitive telling. So it's not. This is not the only book I would suggest you read. If you're interested in it, please do check out the Gallery of Miracles and Madness by Charlie English. It's a fantastic book. So I picked this up as well to kind of go along with that read. All right. And I got a nice big chunkster here. I was wanting this book for a long time. I tried requesting it from a publisher. Never did get it. I probably didn't get through to the right people, my email and stuff. But, you know, I study, one of my major fields of study, along with American Civil War times, is Russian history, Soviet Union, and or communist studies. And when this came out, I had already read a huge, massive, probably the definitive biography on Mao that came out probably 8 years ago. But this was a brand new book, and they added it to Hamilton book. And you know, if you just wait long enough, the Hamilton book, or as Steve would say with the Brattle, it provides, but Hamilton book provides, baby. If you just are patient enough, the bargain book it'll appear. And it did for like $6.95, $7.95. And it's a big, chunky book, nice decal edges. But this is Maoism, A Global History by Julia Lovell. I think this was nominated for an award or two. This just came out in 2019. So, you know, sometimes you got to wait a couple of years for the book to, if you don't have the money and you're kind of wanting it to be under $10, just wait a little while. You know, it'll get there. So I got Maoism, A Global History, and that's pretty much what it is. I won't spend too much time on this. This revelatory work of world history offers a new understanding of the geopolitics of the 20th and 21st centuries. For decades, the West has dismissed Maoism as a local phenomenon that dissipated with the death of Mao. Wrong. That was me. This book recenters China in the global history of the past 80 years. Of course, I'm also very much into China studies lately. I have a book here I want to show you talking about like current events relating to that. Let's see here. Beginning with the movement's birth in northwest China in the 1930s, Julia Lovell shows how Maoism was a crucial motor of the Cold War, with a legacy that lasts to this day. Just as the Soviet Union exported its ideology around the world, China shaped the course of the Vietnam War and the international youth rebellions that conflict triggered, and helped bring to power the murderous Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. Maoism also inspired anti-colonial resistance movements in Africa, terrorism in Germany and Italy, and wars and insurgencies in Peru, India, and Nepal, some of which are still with us today, more than 40 years after Mao's death. Wow. And, you know, isn't Mao just the gift that just keeps on giving? If gift means, you know, death and slaughter and misery, then that gift keeps on giving. Moving from the tea plantations of India to the Andes, from Paris's 5th arrondissement to Tanzania, from the rice fields of Cambodia and the 1968 Chicago protests to Maoism's resurgence in the People's Republic today, this is a landmark history that illuminates the power of ideas to shape the world. And it's so true, the power of ideas to shape the world. In this case, for good or ill, but in this case, ill. I've often thought, you know, wouldn't the world have been a better place if Karl Marx had never been born? I think so. That's my opinion. And same for Hitler as well. And Stalin. You know what I mean? They're all, ugh. Okay. Moving on. So you know I love studies of different countries. I love to learn about different countries, how they came to be, where they're at now. There's no country that doesn't interest me. I'm a very strange, odd bird this way. This one popped up on my Hamilton book search, and I'd never read about this country in isolation before, so I was like, let's check it out. So this is Tunisia, an Arab anomaly, by Safwan M. Masri. This was put out by Columbia University Press. It's not too, these are all very relatively new books. This is 2017. So let me read to you about Tunisia. The Arab Spring began and ended with Tunisia. In a region beset by brutal repression, humanitarian disasters, and civil war, Tunisia's Jasmine Revolution alone gave way to a peaceful transition to a functioning democracy. Within 4 short years, Tunisians passed a progressive constitution, held fair parliamentary elections, and ushered in the country's first ever democratically elected president. Good for Tunisia. But did Tunisia simply avoid the misfortunes that befell its neighbors, or were there particular features that set the country apart and made it a special case? I'm guessing the latter. In Tunisia, an Arab anomaly, Safwan Masri explores the factors that have shaped the country's exceptional experience. He traces Tunisia's history of reform in the realms of education, religion, and women's rights, arguing that the seeds for today's relatively liberal and democratic society were planted as far back as the middle of the 19th century. Masri argues that Tunisia stands out not as a model that can be replicated in other Arab countries, but rather as an anomaly, as its history of reformism set it on a separate trajectory from the rest of the region. The narrative explores notions of identity, the relationship between Islam and society, and the hegemonic role of religion in shaping educational, social, and political agendas across the Arab region. Based on interviews with dozens of experts, leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens, and a synthesis of a rich body of knowledge, Masri provides a sensitive, often personal account that is critical for understanding not only Tunisia, but also the broader Arab world. Again, it was like $6.95, something like that, and brand new, nice, beautiful dust jacket. I love shopping on Hamilton Book. What can I say? So that's another one that I picked up. And this one kind of, I want to read it, I think, in conjunction when I'm reading the Tunisia history. I've read Bernard Lewis's, I read him about 10 years ago. Actually, it might be 20 years ago. But I have read Bernard Lewis. It's been a while since I've read any of his work. I think he might be deceased now. And if you're not, dear sir, I apologize. I saw this book on Hamilton, and I don't have it. I don't think I've ever read it. It's a small little book. It's called The End of Modern History in the Middle East. And that's a picture of Napoleon in Egypt, or a painting. And this is put out by Hoover Institution Press. Small little hardcover. I'll go ahead and read it to you here. For the first time in almost 200 years, the rulers and to some extent the peoples of the Middle East must accept responsibility for their own affairs, make and recognize their own mistakes, and accept the consequences. So this is like a salvo right off the gate. This was actually, I went to read this, the beginning of this the other day, and so it's slightly dated. This book is about 10 years old. It was published in 2011. I'm not sure if it was based on some of his other essays, but in any event, kind of starts off very provocatively. Today, increasing numbers of Middle Easterners, disillusioned with past ideals and, in many countries, alienated from their present rulers, are turning their thoughts or their loyalties, or both, to one of two ideologies: liberal democracy or Islamic fundamentalism. Each offers a reasoned diagnosis of the ills of the region and a prescription for their cure. But if freedom fails and terror triumphs, the peoples of Islam will be the first and greatest victims. They will not be alone, and many others will suffer with them. In The End of Modern History in the Middle East, Bernard Lewis looks at this new era there. With the departure of imperial powers, the region must now, on its own, resolve the political, economic, cultural, and societal problems that have held it back in the world. Lewis details the critical issues for the future of the region. Not surprisingly, oil and water will be key, and the important elements that could help transform the Middle East: women, Turkey, the country Turkey, and Israel. Women, he explains, have the strongest vested interest in social and political freedom. Turkey can and probably will play a growing role in the region. Well, yes, but not for good. This is dated. Things have not turned out the way we were hoping with Turkey. So he's saying the Turks have greater political experience, a more developed economy, and a more balanced society than the Arab states. Well, maybe up until Erdogan took over. But anyway, and the Arab-Israeli conflict as well, in one way or another, will profoundly influence the development of the region as a whole. If the struggle becomes more bitter, it will have a corrosive effect on both Israeli and Arab societies. Let me get a sip of tea. Can you imagine that I talked for an hour yesterday reading these books and talking to you guys, and the whole file just crapped the bed? It was horrible. And I can't even really speak today. Okay. Okay, so peace, in contrast, would speed the progress of the region toward a new age of advanced technology and political freedom. But the continuing struggle within the region, with the consequent diversion of energy and resources to the politics and weaponry of war, can only make likely a resumption of outside interference and domination. So, very slim volume, but I think I might read that on the heels of the Tunisia book. But Tunisia is showing that it can be, it did choose liberal democracy. And with its history of reformism, it was possible, but maybe in other areas it's not. But Tunisia did take the tact where they're managing their own affairs. Okay, let's go over to here. Okay, let's go back to Afghanistan for a minute, because these are all out of the order that I originally filmed this yesterday, but oh well. This book was only $5.95. It's a neat little coffee table type book. It's like a travel guide, a companion guide, but it's full of pictures, and it goes by region. Pictures, artwork, history. It's just really neat. It's Afghanistan, a companion and guide. And you know, when I ordered this, everything was going down in Afghanistan as far as our pullout and things like that. But you know, I have been reading about Afghanistan for a long time. And as hard as it was for our troops over there to fight, because it really is an unconquerable area, the geography is just so inimitable to, you know, or that's not the word. That's not, well, it is inimitable, but intimidating. But at the same time, it really is a rather roughly, you know, majestically gorgeous country, but maybe from the air. I mean, it's just something that it's really rugged, but there's a lot of beauty in Afghanistan, you know, and so I wanted something that kind of captures that, and I really hope that this file is not. I sense that it's glitching. Anyway, so it's just a neat little guide, and it takes you through the different provinces and major like cities and towns, and I mean, look at that. That's gorgeous. But yeah, it's unconquerable, you know. And I think, well, Afghanistan, is it called Bactria back in Alexander the Great's day? But I mean, I think that was, you know, there was a lot of loss there in Bactria, and you know, he got as far as India, right? And then he turned back. But anyway, Afghanistan, $5.95. I just thought I'd pick this up. It's a nice little handy dandy guide and very visual. So, whoops. Okay, let's go back to China real quick. So this is kind of I've had some interest in what's been going on in the South China Seas for a while, and you know, how China is just essentially building islands in the ocean. It's pretty freaking impressive, but also scary. This came out in 2017, but I picked it up for like $5, and this is Crashback: The Power Clash Between the U.S. and China in the Pacific by Michael Faby. Who published this? I don't know. Scribner? I think Scribs. Scribs did. Scribner. Anyway, it's always interested me. So let me just get into this real quick. In the deep blue waters of the Western Pacific, there is a war taking place. It is a warm war, a pushing and shoving match between the U.S., since World War II, the uncontested monarch of the seas, and China, which now possesses the world's largest maritime force. Each day, the heat between the combatants rises as the Chinese, who suffer from centuries-long memories of humiliation, try to claim the South China Sea for their own, and the Americans, who prize freedom of navigation, insist on an open corridor. The immediate danger is that the $5 trillion in international trade that passes through this choke point will grind to a halt. The ultimate danger is that the two titans could be drawn into all-out war. Already, Chinese fighter jets have taken to harassing American reconnaissance planes from as little as 10 feet away, and Chinese ships have grown so bold that they dare to challenge American cruisers, some of the deadliest vessels ever built. Throughout southern Asia, countries with naval forces far smaller than China's react with outrage and growing fear as their bullying neighbor turns coral reefs below the water's surface into man-made islands capable of supporting airstrips, and then, with a claim of territory, enforces 12-mile radius shoot-down zones. The cheek of the Chinese. In certain American Navy war planning rooms, this island-building effort is called the, quote, Great Wall of Sand, end quote. What is inarguable is that every year the U.S. is, quote, losing sea, S-E-A. But that may soon change. It says here that Michael Faby, award-winning journalist, had unprecedented access to the Navy's most exotic ships, aircraft, and submarines, as well as the men and women who command them. He was also among the only Western journalists allowed to board a Chinese warship and observe its operations at sea. That's unusual. I don't think that is happening anymore. The report he's come back with is both a reminder of the state-of-the-art weapons both sides have developed for slaughter, and of a sometimes fiery battle inside the American Navy. This is really intriguing. Between the so-called, quote, panda huggers, end quote, and more hawkish, quote, dragon slayers, end quote. Which of the two factions gains the upper hand will determine if the Chinese finally face a restraint they're unprepared to overcome, and whether what has been mere pushing and shoving will finally ignite into bloody confrontation. So I just felt like this was very timely, and I wanted to read about it in more in-depth detail. So Michael Faby, thank you for that, sir. All right. And this is like political science, I guess. I'd never seen this on Hamilton book before, and it's a work in translation. It was translated from Italian. I'd never heard of this writer. He's an Italian writer. But it's kind of like a catalog of conservative thought, history of European conservative thought. Well, and that's the title, The History of European Conservative Thought by Francesco Guibellet. Sorry, sir. Translated by Rachel Stone. There's our author. He covers a lot of stuff in here, and like brief little snippets, because he's kind of chronicling the different people. So it's like little short bios of each. Let me read this to you. This says, modern conservatism was born in the crisis of the French Revolution that sought to overturn Christianity, monarchy, tradition, and a trust in experience rather than reason. In the name of reason and progress, the French Revolution led to the guillotine, the dictatorship of Napoleon Bonaparte, and a decade of continental war. Today, Western civilization is again in crisis, with an ever-widening progressive campaign against religion, tradition, and ordered liberty. Francesco Guibellet's cogent reassessment of some of conservatism's greatest thinkers could not be timelier. Within these pages, English-speaking readers will come across some familiar names: Burke, Disraeli, Chesterton, Scruton. Americans get their own chapter too, including penetrating examinations of John Adams, Richard Weaver, Henry Regnery, Robert Nisbet, Russell Kirk, William F. Buckley Jr., and Barry Goldwater. But perhaps most interesting in Guibellet's coverage of the continental European tradition, largely Catholic, monarchical, traditionalist, and anti-Jacobin, anti-communist, and anti-fascist. Yay! Guibellet offers insightful intellectual portraits of statesmen and philosophers like Count Clemens von Metternich, the man who restored Europe after the Napoleonic Wars, Eric Voegelin, the German political philosopher who made his career in America and traced recurrent strains of leftism to an early Christian heresy, Joseph de Maistre, the leading French counter-revolutionary philosopher, George Santayana, a Spaniard who became an American philosopher and conservative pragmatist, Jose Ortega y Gasset, who warned of the, quote, revolt of the masses, end quote, and a wide variety of Italian thinkers whose conservatism was forged against a fascist ideology that presented itself as a force for stability and respect for the past, but that was fundamentally modernist and opposed to conservatism. It's key to remember that. A lot of times people just hear the word conservative or conservatism and they equate it with some type of fascist ideology. And to me, true conservatism is more mirrors classical liberalism. And like liberalism has lost its cachet and its meaning because now the politics of the left has moved from a liberal stance to more of a progressive. And so to me, classical liberalism and conservatism are the same thing. And I kind of hew more towards that line. So I like the fact that he's showing that there was a conservative cadre of people and thinkers in Italy who forged their brand against the fascist ideology of the day in Italy. So anyway, sounds interesting. Yeah, unique and written by one of Italy's youngest and brightest conservative thinkers, Francesco. I wish I could pronounce his name. I'm going to have to look it up. This book is sure to enlighten and inform, and just showed up. It was from Regnery Gateway, just showed up on Hamilton, and I said, this is something for my library for sure. Okay. We're getting there. 30 minutes. I really hope this video works. I picked up this book. I had first seen it, I think, on Steve's channel like a couple of years ago when it came out, and I was like, this sounds interesting. Again, Hamilton book, it will eventually just show up there, and I picked it up for like $7.95. This is The Narrow Corridor, States, Societies, and the Fate of Liberty by Darren Esmoglu and James A. Robinson. It's by Penguin Press. Nice hardcover. Beautiful brand new book. They also wrote Why Nations Fail, and it sounds like it's something I might have read before. It sounds very familiar. Anyway, let me read this to you. Liberty is hardly the, quote, natural, end quote, order of things. In most places and at most times, the strong have dominated the weak, and human freedom has been quashed by force or by customs and norms. Either states have been too weak to protect... Let me start over. I'm reading too fast. Either states have been too weak to protect individuals from these threats, or states have been too strong for people to protect themselves from despotism. Liberty emerges only when society is mobilized, actively participates in politics, and holds its own against the state and the elites. There is a Western myth that political liberty is a durable construct, a steady state, reached by a process of, quote, enlightenment. According to the authors, this static view is a fantasy. I agree. Rather, the corridor to liberty is narrow and stays open only via a fundamental and incessant struggle between state and society. The power of state institutions and the elites that control them has never gone uncontested in a free society. In fact, the capacity to contest them is the foundation of liberty. State institutions have to evolve continuously as the nature of conflicts and the needs of society change, and thus society's ability to keep state and rulers accountable must intensify in tandem with the capabilities of the state. Interesting. The struggle between state and society becomes self-reinforcing, inducing both to develop a richer array of capacities just to keep moving forward along the corridor, the narrow corridor. Interesting. So a nice little study between state and society. Let me see what kind of chapter headings we have here. Will to Power, Economics Outside the Corridor, Allegory of Good Government, The European Scissors, Mandate of Heaven. So these names don't really indicate too much. But chapter 15 does, Living with the Leviathan. And indeed, they do have a cover of the original Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes here. So some interesting stuff in the center here. We got interesting. It kind of covers a little bit of everything. So I picked it up again. I was happy to see it finally get around to Hamilton book. Brand new book, about $8. Okay, so the last book I got will kind of bring my small collection of books on Chernobyl up to date. This came out a couple years ago, and I was really intrigued by it. 2019, yeah, 2 years old. But I loved Midnight in Chernobyl. I loved Sergei Plokhy's book. I listened to it on audiobook, his version of what happened at Chernobyl. But anyway, this one is Manual for Survival, a Chernobyl Guide to the Future by Kate Brown. And there's the iconic Ferris wheel in Pripyat, the town that was abandoned overnight pretty much. This was put out by Norton. So let me just read this to you real quick, and then we'll wrap this up, and hopefully this video works. It begins with like a letter. I'll just read it out to you. It says, "Dear comrades, since the accident at the Chernobyl power plant, there has been a detailed analysis of the radioactivity of the food and territory of your population point. The results show that living and working in your village will cause no harm to adults or children." So began a pamphlet issued by the Ukrainian Ministry of Health, which, despite its optimism, went on to warn its readers against consuming local milk, berries, or mushrooms, or going into the surrounding forest. This was only one of many misleading bureaucratic manuals that, with apparent good intentions, seriously underestimated the far-reaching consequences of the Chernobyl nuclear catastrophe. After 1991, international organizations from the Red Cross to Greenpeace sought to help the victims, yet found themselves stymied by post-Soviet political circumstances they did not understand. International diplomats and scientists allied to the nuclear industry evaded or denied the fact of a wide-scale public health disaster caused by radiation exposure. Efforts to spin the story about Chernobyl were largely successful. The official death toll ranges between, get this, 31 and 54 people. 31 to 54 people is what the official record says. In reality, radiation exposure from the disaster caused between 35,000 and 150,000 deaths in Ukraine alone. No major international study tallied the damage, leaving Japanese leaders to repeat many of the same mistakes after the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011. Drawing on a decade of archival research and on-the-ground interviews in Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus, Kate Brown unveils the full breadth of the devastation and the whitewash that followed. Her findings make clear the irreversible impact of man-made radioactivity on every living thing, and hauntingly, they force us to confront the untold legacy of decades of weapons testing and other nuclear incidents, and the fact that we are emerging into a future for which the survival manual has yet to be written. Fantastic. Kate Brown, she is an award-winning historian of environmental and nuclear history at MIT. She wrote a previous book, Plutopia, and that won 7 academic prizes. There's our illustrious author. So I was really pleased to pick this up. Again, $6 or $7. So, okay, here's what's going to happen. Peg's going to hit... Cross her fingers and hope that this video is not corrupt, this file, and I can upload it, combine it with the one that came before. Anyway, if you're watching it, it was a success, it was a success, and we'll go from there. I have more books to show you. I have a lot of new books that came in the mail. I have a small book outlet. Well, not a small. I have a book outlet haul I need to show you. And I have another Hamilton book order that just came in yesterday. Okay, guys, fingers crossed that this works. I hope you enjoy these books. Please let me know what you thought of any of them below. And as always, thank you for joining me here at the History Shelf. And until next time, keep reading, my people. Bye-bye.